"Don't move, lady. You fit the profile." That's what the officer barked before slapping cold steel handcuffs on a 60-year-old black woman standing quietly outside Gate 12 at LAX. No crime, no probable cause, just skin color and suspicion. What unfolded in the next 6 minutes wasn't just a mistake, it was a national embarrassment. The woman he tried to humiliate turned out to be a federal judge. Let that sink in. In 2025, this is still America, where a badge can sometimes speak louder than justice. It echoes James Baldwin's haunting words, "To be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time." If that rage burns in you too, hit the like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel, because telling these stories isn't just about views, it's about truth, and truth deserves an audience. It started like any other morning at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Travelers dragged their suitcases, the intercom buzzed with boarding announcements, and TSA agents did their routine checks. Terminal C hummed with the usual Monday rush, but within minutes, that routine would be shattered by a pair of handcuffs, a racist assumption, and a mistake that would change two officers' lives forever. Judge Naomi Prescott had just returned from a judicial conference in Seattle. A calm, composed black woman in her early 60s, Naomi wore a dark navy pantsuit, modest pearl earrings, and her graying hair was neatly pulled back into a bun. She didn't stand out, at least not by her own design, but her quiet strength and posture of authority gave her presence weight. She had just stepped off her flight and was making her way toward the rideshare pickup zone when the confrontation began. She moved briskly, wheeling a compact silver carry-on behind her, heading toward the escalator. Then came the voice.
"Excuse me, ma'am."
"Stop right there." Naomi turned to see two uniformed police officers approaching. Officer Travis Cole and his partner, Officer Darren Walsh. Cole in his early 40s, white, bulky, with a buzz cut and mirrored sunglasses, took the lead. Walsh, younger and clearly less confident, followed behind. Neither had the look of someone offering assistance. "Is there a problem, officer?" Naomi asked calmly, not slowing her stride, until they stepped in front of her. "You match the description of someone we're looking for," Cole said, his hand resting on his utility belt. Naomi's brow furrowed slightly. "May I ask what the description is?" Cole's lips curled. "Black woman, mid-50s to 60s, traveling alone, wearing dark clothing. You carrying anything suspicious?" Naomi blinked. "That describes at least 10 women on my flight." Cole ignored her and looked her up and down with a sneer. "What's in the bag? Jewelry? Cash? You smuggling something?" She drew a breath. "I'm a federal employee. I just got off a flight from Seattle. You can check my ID." Cole held out his hand. "Let's see it." Naomi reached into her blazer slowly and pulled out a black leather ID wallet. She flipped it open to reveal a standard federal judge credential, her photo, federal insignia, and clearance number. Cole didn't even glance at the details.
"This doesn't mean anything to me," he muttered.
"It means I have Article 3 authority to preside over cases involving constitutional rights," she replied, her voice clipped but controlled. "You're detaining a sitting federal judge." "Big talk," Cole chuckled, stepping forward. "We get fakes all the time. You'll answer our questions in the holding room." That was when it escalated. Without further warning, Cole grabbed her arm and pulled it behind her back. "Turn around. You're being detained for questioning." Walsh hesitated. Travis, maybe we should cuff her," Cole barked. "She's resisting." "I'm not resisting," Naomi said, incredulous. "You have no probable cause." "Resisting and arguing. Real suspicious," Cole muttered. The cold metal snapped around her wrists. Passengers stopped. Some stared. A few took out phones, but hesitated, unsure what they were witnessing. Naomi stood still, jaw tight, eyes forward. She wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of a scene, but the humiliation, the handcuffs, the stares, the condescension was real. "Let me explain something to you," Cole said, standing too close. "You people think dressing up in a suit makes you untouchable, but not here. Not with me. Naomi's gaze met his, steady and defiant. You're making a very serious mistake. Oh, I doubt that. They began to lead her toward the security annex beside Terminal C, a small office tucked behind a frosted glass door, with airport police etched across the surface. Cole nodded toward a nearby TSA agent. Got it handled. The agent looked uncomfortable but didn't interfere. As Naomi walked, still in cuffs, she began to mentally document every detail: time, location, number of witnesses, names on badges. Cole's read days, 7942. Walsh's, 817. She wasn't just being arrested. She was gathering evidence. Inside the office, Cole pushed her into a metal chair. Let's go through that bag. What's in the pouch? Drugs? Weapons? Naomi didn't answer. She simply stared ahead, calculating. She knew she couldn't fight them physically, but she didn't need to. All she needed was one call. Walsh fidgeted, pacing. Travis, man, I don't think this is the right call. I mean, what if she's telling the truth? She's bluffing. Cole snapped. You don't get to that seat without learning how to lie. She probably forged that ID. These people always have a hustle. Walsh's face twitched. He wasn't comfortable, but Cole's authority kept him from acting. Then Cole smirked. Tell you what, lady, you pay a little cash. Maybe we can skip all this. Sound good? Naomi raised an eyebrow. Are you trying to extort a federal judge now? Cole leaned in, his breath reeking of coffee and arrogance. I'm trying to help you help yourself. $500 in cash, and this goes away. Naomi didn't blink. I want my phone. Cole laughed. So, you can tweet about this. I don't think so. Naomi's voice turned icy. So I can call my security team. Cole scoffed. Security team? What are you? Some senator's assistant. Walsh, meanwhile, had begun checking the ID again. He looked up. Travis, I think this might be real. Cole shot him a look. I said drop it. Naomi turned to Walsh. Open the phone pocket in my bag. There's a government-issued phone. It'll have a secure badge on the back. Against Cole's orders, Walsh reached into the bag and pulled out a sleek black phone with a gold Department of Justice emblem. His hands shook slightly. Naomi calmly turned her head. Unlock it for me. Cole rolled his eyes. You're unbelievable. Walsh, sweat forming at his temple, unlocked the phone and handed it to her. Her hands were still cuffed, but she tapped the screen with her thumb. Face ID activated. She made a call. A voice answered almost immediately. This is Director Prescott, she said, her tone now unmistakably authoritative. I'm being detained by 2 local officers at DFW Airport, Terminal C, inside the police annex. Officer Travis Cole, Reddy's number 7942, and Officer Darren Walsh. I am requesting immediate intervention from the U.S. Marshals Service and DOJ Internal Affairs. A pause. Then, understood, Director. Units en route. ATA 6 minutes. Naomi looked up and met Cole's eyes. You have 6 minutes to uncuff me and start writing your apology. The blood drained from Cole's face. Director. Walsh's knees nearly buckled. Oh my God. The woman they'd mocked, handcuffed, accused, and tried to extort was not just a federal judge. She was the leader of the United States Federal Judicial Oversight Committee, one of the highest-ranking judicial figures in the country, with authority that superseded local and state law enforcement. And now, every second ticked down toward their reckoning. Cole stammered, look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot, but Naomi didn't respond. She stared straight ahead, back straight, waiting. Outside, unnoticed by the 2 men, a pair of black SUVs had already turned off from the main drive and were approaching the terminal at speed. Because when the federal judiciary gets disrespected, the system doesn't whisper, it roars. Officer Grant's smug grin faltered. As soon as the phone call ended, the black woman he had manhandled like a suspect wasn't just another traveler. She was someone important, very important. The murmured code words, Article 7 override, Justice Circuit, and Level 1 escalation meant nothing to him. but they sure meant something to the voice on the other end of that call. He turned to his partner, Officer Denton, who looked just as pale. Judge Monica Ellison slowly turned to face them, her calm now sharpened into icy authority. "You two just made a career-ending mistake," she said, her voice even and precise, like a gavel striking oak. Her wrists were still bound in the department-issued cuffs, red welts forming just below her shirt cuffs, but she stood tall. Judge and Denton blinked confused. "Judge of what?" "Federal District Court, Eastern Circuit. Appointed by the President of the United States, and unless you'd like to be added to a long list of defendants, I suggest you step back." Grant stammered. "Wait, you never said anything. You just stood there." "I was giving you a chance to correct yourselves," she said flatly, "and now that chance is gone." Across the terminal, 3 men in plain dark suits began sprinting down the concourse. No TSA badges, no airport staff, lanyards, just sharp eyes and earpieces. Travelers instinctively cleared a path. A woman at the Starbucks kiosk dropped her phone. One of the men flashed a gold badge, federal, and waved off the nearby security guards. Agent Marcus Hall, field director of the Justice Oversight Division, didn't slow down as he approached. "Ma'am," he said, eyes locking onto the handcuffs. "Are you injured?" "No," she replied, "but these two have violated multiple federal laws in less than 6 minutes. Get those cuffs off." Without hesitation, Hall nodded to one of the agents, who reached into his coat and produced a small universal release key. Within seconds, the cuffs clicked open, and Judge Ellison gently rotated her wrists. The red marks were already turning a deeper shade of bruised purple. Officer Grant backed up a step, visibly sweating. "Okay, look, we didn't know. She wasn't carrying credentials. She was just standing in line, acting how?" Hall interrupted, his tone lethal. "Like a law-abiding citizen. Like someone who didn't scream or film you? You mean like that?" Denton was already shaking his head. "No, man, this isn't what it looks like." "This is exactly what it looks like," Agent Hall snapped. "You racially profiled a black federal judge, used excessive force, made an unlawful detention, and from the audio pulled from the terminal cameras, attempted intimidation. That's a civil rights case, stacked on top of at least 3 federal violations. Hope you like orange." The murmurs among bystanders had turned into open gasps. Phones were out now. Cameras were recording. Someone whispered, "Is this really happening?" The senior FBI agent stepped in closer to Denton. "Badge. Gun. Now." I need to call my supervisor," Denton pleaded, his voice cracking. "We didn't mean any harm." "You can call your supervisor from the holding cell," Hall barked. "Your body cams were on the entire time. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's an indictment." Judge Ellison stepped in, her voice as cold and calm as a glacier. "No more words. Everything you say from this point on will only make your sentencing worse. And no, I won't be recusing myself from the investigation. You don't get to ask for leniency from the same system you tried to humiliate." The scene had turned quiet, eerily so. Even the flight attendants behind the gate desk had stopped boarding passengers. The PA system was still announcing departures, but it now seemed like background noise to the surreal, tense tableau unfolding at the center of Terminal C. Within minutes, both officers were disarmed. Their sidearms, batons, and radios were collected and placed in sealed evidence bags. Hall turned to one of his agents. "Contact Internal Affairs at the Metropolitan Police Department. We'll need a full personnel file on both of them. Also get a rep from DOJ Civil Rights on standby." As the agents led the disgraced officers away, the crowd slowly began to applaud, not out of joy, but out of a shared sense of justice being served. But Judge Ellison didn't bask in the moment. She quietly gathered her things from the checkpoint, adjusted her blazer, and spoke only once more. "This is not the end. This is where accountability begins." By the time the evening news picked up the footage from social media, the story had already gone viral. Headlines exploded. "Federal judge illegally detained by racist cops at airport. Justice delayed, but not denied at Terminal C. Judge Monica Ellison, calm under cuffs." Within 48 hours, Officer Grant and Officer Denton were suspended without pay. The mayor's office issued a statement, calling the incident deeply disturbing, and promised a full investigation. But those words meant little now, because the federal investigation had already begun. A week later, in a hearing room packed with reporters, Judge Ellison testified before a congressional subcommittee on civil rights abuse in law enforcement. She recounted the events not with bitterness, but with precision. She didn't ask for sympathy, she asked for reform. "This wasn't about me," she said. "This was about how easily it could happen to someone who didn't have my title, my access, or my protection. For every Monica Ellison, how many names don't we know?" The Department of Justice announced the launch of a federal task force to examine racially motivated misconduct at transportation hubs. The Oversight Committee requested access to body cam footage, which was later released, and confirmed the officers' aggressive tone and inissive behavior. Public outrage only grew. Civil rights groups took up the case as a symbol. "If this can happen to a federal judge," the NAACP president said during a press conference, "what hope does an everyday citizen have?" Officer Grant, now facing federal charges of unlawful detention and civil rights violations, issued a written apology through his attorney. "I had no idea who she was," it read. But the words rang hollow. Denton, who had been visibly uncomfortable during the incident, agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony confirmed that Grant had a pattern of profiling travelers and often made off-script stops, especially targeting minorities. Judge Ellison, meanwhile, returned to the bench. She didn't speak much about the incident beyond her formal statements, but every ruling, every sentence she handed down carried a new weight, as if her own experience had stripped away the final layer of illusion about justice being blind. The most powerful moment came months later at the sentencing hearing of Grant and Denton. Ellison didn't attend in person. She sent a statement to be read aloud by the federal prosecutor. "In the moments I stood in silence, wrongly cuffed by men who saw my skin before my humanity, I remembered every defendant who had ever stood before me hoping for fairness. This country doesn't need perfect rips. It needs accountable ones." The judge presiding over the case echoed her words before delivering the sentence. Grant received 11 years in federal prison. Denton, for his cooperation and lesser role, received 6 years. Airport security protocols were overhauled. A new federal directive mandated advanced anti-bias training for all law enforcement personnel operating in public transit spaces. Anonymous audits were introduced. Complaints could now be filed directly to a federal oversight app monitored in real time. For Judge Monica Ellison, the wounds on her wrists had healed, but what remained was a scar etched into the conscience of a nation, one that now knew that even the highest among them weren't immune from prejudice, but also that justice could still speak clearly, firmly, and without fear. Months after the incident at the airport, Judge Monica Ellison walked through the halls of the United States District Court with the same quiet authority she always had. But now, something had shifted. Colleagues glanced at her with a newfound respect, not because of her title, but because of what she had endured and how she had responded. She hadn't lashed out. She hadn't made threats. She had simply stood tall, spoken the truth, and let the law do what it was meant to do. The country had been watching. The footage had sparked not just outrage, but action. Several major police departments across the nation rolled out new mandatory bias training. Congress introduced a bill aimed at enhancing civil rights protections during security screenings in public transit locations. Airports across the U.S. were now required to maintain independent oversight panels to investigate misconduct, with real power, not just symbolic roles. Judge Ellison returned to her courtroom with an even stronger sense of duty. Every time she looked into the eyes of someone standing before her, especially those from marginalized communities, she felt the weight of her own experience pressing on her decisions. She was no longer just interpreting the law. She was now living proof that the system, though flawed, could still work if held to account. She didn't grant interviews. She declined book deals. She rejected every speaking engagement from cable networks wanting a soundbite. "This isn't entertainment," she told one producer. "This is about justice." But behind the scenes, she was deeply involved in change. She joined a task force inside the Department of Justice, focusing on racial profiling in law enforcement. She worked with civil liberties groups and federal judges to create a bench check on implicit bias and courtroom equity. Quietly, methodically, she became a force not just inside the courtroom, but behind the policies that shaped it. Officer Denton, now serving his sentence at a medium-security federal facility in Pennsylvania, wrote a handwritten letter to Judge Ellison 6 months into his term. In it, he expressed remorse, detailed how he'd let peer pressure and fear cloud his judgment, and how her words had haunted him ever since. "You are not wrong for not recognizing who I am. You are wrong for abusing your authority." She never responded, not out of malice, but because she believed his growth, if real, needed to come without expectation of forgiveness. Redemption, she often said, is a path, not a plea. Ryan Grant, on the other hand, filed multiple appeals. He claimed that the sentence was too harsh, that media attention had prejudiced the court, that he was set up by a system desperate for a scapegoat. None of the appeals succeeded. The evidence was too overwhelming, the intent too clear, the damage too real. But the real impact of what happened that day couldn't be measured in court transcripts or years served. It was felt in the quiet shift of trust, hard-won, but deeply meaningful, between the public and the systems that governed them. When people saw Judge Ellison rise from that airport bench, handcuffed yet composed, they saw themselves, they saw their mothers, daughters, grandmothers, they saw dignity under pressure and justice refusing to be silenced. One afternoon, nearly a year to the day after the incident, a young black girl stopped Judge Ellison on the courthouse steps. She couldn't have been more than 12, holding a school notebook covered in stickers in her grandmother's hand. "Are you the lady from the airport?" she asked, eyes wide. Judge Ellison smiled gently. "Yes, I am." The girl nodded, then whispered, "I want to be like you." Judge Ellison knelt to her level and said, "Then promise me something. Always speak up when something's wrong, even if your voice shakes." The girl nodded solemnly. Her grandmother teared up, and Judge Ellison, without another word, stood and continued into the courthouse. Justice, it turned out, didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered back. In a world where silence often protects injustice, Judge Ellison's story reminds us that true power lies not in titles, but in integrity. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." When authority is abused, and prejudice is disguised as procedure, it's up to people of courage like you and me to speak up. Her quiet defiance at the airport was not just personal strength. It was a call to all of us to hold the line. So if this story moved you, don't just scroll on. Hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories that matter. Together we can amplify voices that too often go unheard, and maybe, just maybe, change the way justice is served.